This is the Dark Zero Horror Network. Psychological Autopsies.
Welcome to the debate. Our source material today really forces us to look squarely at the face, or maybe more accurately, the concealment of one of horror's biggest figures, Jason Voorhees. The material traces this rapid evolution of his look, but it really highlights a conflict at the heart of the franchise's identity. The shift from this grounded, gritty terror to something more mythic, more marketable.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a really pivotal moment in slasher history here. We're basically asking if the raw, primal terror and the very human vulnerability of the burlap sackhead from Friday the 13th Part 2 is a better concept than the unstoppable, iconic image of hockey mask Jason that, took over from Part 3 onward.
And that's the central question for us today. Does the undeniable global success and just the sheer functionality of the hockey mask justify getting rid of the character's earlier realism? I'm going to argue that the hockey mask is definitively superior because it created the mythic symbol of vengeance that the franchise absolutely needed to survive.
And I'm coming at this from the complete opposite direction. I believe the Sackhead version is superior precisely because it gives us a more grounded, a more psychologically compelling, and ultimately a more human antagonist. It's a portrayal that really maximizes genuine horror before the character just became, an action figure.
Before we really dive into the weeds of Camp Crystal Lake's most famous resident, we do want to thank the audience of the Dark Zero Horror Network for tuning in.
And please, if you enjoy these discussions, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue to do these deep dives into horror history. All right, let's get into it.
So when we talk about horror iconography, very few images have that perfect mix of simplicity and pure menace, like the hockey mask. It's the look that didn't just cement Jason's status, it transformed him from really a secondary killer filling his mother's shoes into a top-tier horror symbol. You can put him right next to Freddy Krueger or Michael Myers, and he belongs there. That mask turned Jason into this faceless mechanism of fate, a pure, unstoppable force. It let him break free from being, just some guy getting revenge, which is kind of the ceiling for the Sackhead version in Part 2.
I see why you'd favor the scalability of the mask, but I'd argue that scalability is exactly the problem. That mask, it's iconic, but it represents the moment the franchise pivoted toward high-concept commercial product. The burlap sackhead with that one crude eyehole cutout, the rope around his neck, that is the last time we see a recognizably human killer. He's in denim overalls, a plaid shirt. It's a look that fits perfectly with the rustic, isolated backwoods setting of those early films. That makeshift disguise, it emphasizes his shame, his deformity, and it ties directly back to his tragic backstory.
But that makeshift quality is also inherently limiting, isn't it? It feels like a temporary disguise, not a defining statement of who he is.
It is limited, but that's what makes it so much more terrifying. It feels self-made, it feels organic, and that amplifies the tension in a way that's so raw. It's the purity of the early franchise before the slasher formula became this big commercial machine. You're watching a tangible, deformed man trying desperately to hide himself. The hockey mask just erases all that essential psychological weight.
Okay, I do acknowledge the aesthetic appeal of the Sackhead's groundedness. But the hockey mask was, and this is crucial, a necessary technical evolution for the franchise to even survive. It was vital for the sequels to be mass-producible. The mask gave them visual consistency, which helped with shooting, and it got rid of the need for complex, time-consuming facial prosthetics for every scene. The character became a production asset. And beyond that, the mask itself is adaptable. The original was, I think, a modified Detroit Red Wings goalie mask, and it changed over time. They added the red triangles, it got cracked, damaged. Those visual cues let the filmmakers track his history on the mask itself.
That's a fascinating defense of the production logistics, but let's talk about the nature of the threat itself. We're arguing about who Jason is, and the Sackhead version, especially in Part 2, is defined by his fallibility. He's clumsy, he trips and falls, he gets hurt, he takes a hatchet to the shoulder. gets a chainsaw to the leg, he gets knocked around.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning, because what you call vulnerability, I see as a weakness that limits the character's potential. When you highlight his physical limits, you're anchoring the story to just a simple man with a vendetta, and that really lowers the ceiling on how terrifying he can be.
But that's what makes him scarier in a pure horror context. He's not some ghost. He's a powerful, deformed man, driven by a basic human instinct. He can be hurt, but he just keeps getting back up. The fear comes from his relentless persistence, despite his limitations. The Sackhead Jason is a Jason who could plausibly be defeated, which raises the stakes for the audience in a way that the invincible Jason of the later films just can't.
The evidence, though, suggests the audience and the filmmakers moved away from that vulnerability very quickly. The mask was necessary to make him that emotionless force, that symbol of vengeance that the slasher genre started to demand for, repeatable box office success. Once he puts on that mask, he's unburdened by human clumsiness. He becomes the efficient, silent, relentless silhouette that defines his real cultural legacy.
But I'd argue that the crude, unsettling look of the sack invokes a better sense of desperation and unpredictability. It feels self-made, It fits a character who definitely wouldn't just go to a sporting goods store to pick out gear. This disguise gives him a psychological edge. The fear is rooted in this deranged recluse hiding a specific deformity, not in some slick horror brand.
I'll grant you the psychological edge of the makeshift disguise, but the hockey mask gave them unparalleled long-term visual continuity and, frankly, just better memorability. It's a visual language that goes beyond any one film. Think about the details, the red triangles, that iconic axe crack from part 3 that gets deeper in the final chapter. Those details became a way to track his physical decay. You could even transition him into that metallic Uber Jason in Jason X. The sack offers no visual shorthand like that. You can't carry a franchise on it.
But that consistency comes at a huge cost: narrative coherence. And this gets to the key problem of the transition itself.
Well, again, the mask's adoption in Part 3 served an essential practical function. Once slashes became this mass-produced commodity, the mask allowed for that consistent visual portrayal you need for that kind of formula. It made sure every sequel delivered the aesthetic people were paying for.
But the transition is so lazy. It sacrifices internal consistency for an external, marketable image. And it creates that hilarious continuity error where Jason, who had this wild, shaggy hair in Part 2, is suddenly completely bald when he gets the mask in Part 3. That absurd change proves the choice was purely utilitarian. It prioritized production ease over respecting the character they just established. It's just a clumsy handoff.
I see the humor in the bald head, I do. But that little lapse in continuity is nothing compared to the massive cultural payoff. The mask immediately elevates the character from a disfigured recluse into a cultural monolith. You just can't achieve that level of iconic horror villain status with a dirty piece of burlap. That look is stuck in Part 2. The mask is what let the character explode globally.
The sack is limited in scope, yes, but its limitation is its power. It's part of that raw, unpolished, almost exploitation film horror of the early 80s. The Sackhead gives us a killer with limits, a Jason who might actually lose. And that is intrinsically more terrifying than the invincible juggernaut we get later on.
That's a good point on intensity. The hockey mask is what allows the audience to project pure malice onto him. The sack, it reveals too much. You're aware of his shame, his desperation. The mask provides the necessary blank slate for pure, unadulterated vengeance. It takes the character from a messy individual to a clean, efficient symbol of dread. It's just conceptually better designed for the job.
And that clean, efficient symbol is where the psychological intrigue dies for me. The sack's disguise invokes a gritty, unsettling reality that the polished mask just can't replicate. The humanity, the fact that he's just this massive man with a bag over his head, is the anchor for the terror. You're looking at a murderer who chooses to hide, not an unfeeling machine.
But the sheer adaptability of the mask allows him to endure. Look at how it changes from the clean one to the waterlogged one in Part 8 to the fused metallic masks later on. The mask itself became a character, documenting his decay. The sack has no visual history like that.
The depth of the sack comes from what it suggests about Jason's emotional state, his deep-seated need to hide his face. The mask suggests a professional killer, which really diminishes his tragic origins. The sack suggests a tormented soul acting out. It's far more resonant. The mask may have provided the cash flow, but the sack provided the character's soul.
To summarize my position, the hockey mask is the definitive superior image of Jason Voorhees. Its iconic status, its efficiency, and its success in transforming Jason into a scalable, mythic killer, all of that validate it as a better design choice and a more powerful cultural symbol. It allowed the franchise to endure by moving him beyond the limits of being just a man.
And while the hockey mask is undeniably iconic, and, was crucial for the franchise's commercial success, I maintain that the Sackhead look offers a richer, more compelling experience for anyone who values humanity, vulnerability, and the primal raw terror of those early films. It represents his tormented origins before he became a stylized icon. Sacrificing psychological depth for visual scalability is not an upgrade.
Ultimately, I think the passion that fans have for both sides of this shows that both looks achieve a potent form of horror. You've got primal, grounded terror versus mythic, unstoppable vengeance. And both are now, inseparable from Jason's identity.
Exactly. And the source material really benefits from exploring both, showing that evolution from a human antagonist hiding his face to the legend defined by the mask he took from a victim. We'll leave it to the listener to decide which face of Jason is the most compelling.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate. We look forward to exploring more substantive disagreements in the material with you next